Hello, welcome on into another episode of the Whiskey Crusaders. I'm Will. Today I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of whiskey terms in under 6 minutes. Are you ready? Here we go. Whiskey, the big term under which many other things fall. It's almost always made from 3 ingredients: grain, yeast, and water. Distilled, aged in oak, and bottled at no less than 40% ABV. Let's talk about those grains real quick. Corn is a grass used to make spirits globally, but found its fame in the U.S. with bourbon. It's a U.S. category of spirits with laws. The big ones are made in the U.S., 51% corn, aged in a new oak vessel, no less than 40% ABV. It can also be used to make corn whiskey. Has to be at least 80% corn, aged in oak, no less than 40% ABV. Or Tennessee whiskey is a U.S. category. This has the same rules as bourbon, plus distilled in Tennessee and run through a maple charcoal filter before aging in the barrel. Barley. Barley is a type of grass. Fantastic for making whiskey because of its reactive properties with yeast, especially when malted. Malt, or malting, is the process of tricking the grain into growing and releasing hidden sugars from deep within that can be made into alcohol. Rye. Rye is a type of grass. Think rye bread. Also, this is a U.S. category. Has to be at least 51% rye, aged in new oak, no less than 40% ABV. Wheat. Again, this is a type of grass. This is also a U.S. legal category. 51% wheat, aged in new oak, no less than 40% ABV. Mash bill. Mash bill is the mix of grains used. We talked about earlier the legal being 51% this grain. The other 49% can make up whatever grains they want to use. Peat. To stop the malting process, we need heat. Peat is dried, decayed earth that is cut into bricks and burned as firewood. The smoke is used to heat the barley and stop the malting. This imparts smoke and, more importantly, carbon atoms. Yeast. Yeast is the best thing ever, because without it we would not have alcohol. Yeast is a fungus that eats sugars and digests it into alcohol, CO2, and heat. Water source. Being one of only 3 ingredients allowed in most categories, it's kind of a big deal. This refers to where the distillery gets its water. Fermentation. When yeast is added to the water and mash at a very specific temperature range, this process begins and alcohol is created. The pot still. Typically made from mostly copper and shaped somewhat like a pot, with a tapering column on top that leads to the line arm and onto the condenser. The mixture is heated to the boiling point of alcohol while staying below the boiling point of water. Reflux. Pots range in size. In the pot, the molecules heat independently, and if they are too heavy to make it out of the line arm and out, they fall back into the solution. They reheat and try again with less weight, aka water. More reflux equals a lighter spirit. Coffee still, or continuous still. This still can be set to run, continuously. Plates heat the liquid as it's falling down, allowing new spirits to be fed in constantly from the top. What is given up for in flavor is made up for in volume. ABV, the amount of alcohol in the solution as represented by a percentage. 40% is alcohol, the other 60% is water. Proof, double the ABV to get the proof. It's completely unnecessary and often confusing to consumers. It should be removed from labels in my opinion. White dog, the stuff that comes directly off the still, often called new make, cleric, or moonshine. But moonshine, however, is an incorrect term because the term itself implies illicit or illegal spirits. Proofing. Most whiskey has water added to it to dilute the spirit. This is done for many reasons. The main two are flavor consistency and economics. More water used means the barrel is going to last longer. Blending. Almost all whiskeys on the market today are blends, with many barrels in order to create brand consistency. If it doesn't specifically say single barrel on it, it is a blend. Even single malt scotches are blends created from one distillery. Char. They burn the inside of the barrel with fire. This creates a charcoal layer to the wood. This is done to different char levels depending upon the needs of the maker. Maturation is the stuff that happens in the barrels. Evaporation, or angel share. Gone forever. Hot climates tend to evaporate more water quickly, while cooler climates tend to evaporate alcohol at a higher rate. Adsorption. Filtration. The char layer of the barrel acts as a charcoal filter for the liquid inside. Absorption, or filter. Under that, the red layer of the barrel is home to all the flavor molecules waiting to be imparted onto the spirit. Barrel usually refers to a 53-gallon container used to hold liquid in the U.S. Cask usually refers to a 63-gallon vessel used to hold liquid in the U.K. Single malt. 2 words, 2 legal definitions. Single means that it was made all at one distillery. Malt means that the only grain used was malted barley. Single grain. Single means one distillery. Grain means a grain or a mix of grains that is not 100% malted barley. Blended malt. Blended means more than one distillery. Malt means malted barley is the only grain used. Blended grain. Blended means it was made at more than one distillery. Grain means a grain or a mix of grains that is not 100% malted barley. Scotch whiskey. The big laws are distilled from grain, mashed, distilled, and aged in Scotland for a minimum of 3 years, 40% ABV minimum. Irish whiskey. Distilled from grain, mashed, distilled, and aged in Ireland for a minimum of 3 years, 40% ABV minimum. Canadian whiskey. Distilled from grain, mashed, distilled, and aged in Canada for a minimum of 3 years, and bottled at no less than 40% ABV. Japanese whiskey. Currently, there are not a lot of laws or governing bodies controlling what is called Japanese whiskey. It may or may not be made in Japan, so yeah. American whiskey. Distilled from grain to no more than 95% ABV. Stored in oak containers. Characteristics generally attributed to whiskey. Straight whiskey. Straight is a legal term, meaning distilled from grain to no more than 95% ABV from a single distillery, aged in oak for no less than 2 years. Bottled and bond. Means that it was distilled by one distillery in one season by one master distiller, aged for 4 years. Has to be 50% ABV. No additives can be added other than water. Blended whiskey. In American usage, a blend of straight whiskey and unaged spirit. Must be at least 20% straight whiskey. Grain neutral spirits. Unaged spirits distilled to no no more than 95 ABV. Caramel, cooked and browned sugars. It's allowed as a coloring agent for European and Canadian whiskeys, but not allowed in the US for categories such as bourbon or rye. Hey, thanks everybody for watching this episode of the Whiskey Crusaders. Hope you enjoyed the content.